Hey, gang, over the last 4 years in particular, many of us have been rather, how should I say, we've been feeling rather despondent as we've together just watched our society erode all around us. It was like we were watching one form of social deterioration stack on top of another. Rising rates of divorce, gender confusion, rampant moral relativism. Families have been torn apart. Children are growing up without eternal guiding principles, and the very essence of society has been at stake. In the past several years, tradition, morality, the very family unit itself, they've all been under constant, relentless assault from the far left. But then enter Donald J. Trump, who ran on restoring these foundational elements of our society and bringing back sanity and common sense to America. And the wonderful news is that we, the people, recognize that these alarming trends threaten the foundation of our communities, our way of life, indeed, our civilization itself. The people have spoken. Trump's massive victory gave a clear cultural mandate that emphasized that we are sick and tired of any and all woke nonsense and the breakdown of our society. True to his campaign promises, Trump has already issued executive orders slashing DEI, and one that stated unequivocally that our federal government recognizes only two genders. Now, despite the amazing progress that Donald Trump is making on restoring sanity at the top-down level, at the executive level, there's still a lot of bottom-up cultural work to be done to truly shift the nation's morality. The consequences of the assault on family values over the past several decades are far-reaching. Our children are navigating a world rife with confusion and chaos, devoid of traditional morals. So what can we do to help restore the indispensable foundational pillars of faith, family, and freedom? Well, joining me today is author Turley Dillehay. Tilly is a pastor's wife and homeschooling mother of four in the smallest county of Tennessee, and her newest book, My Dear Hemlock, provides an imaginative twist to the screw tape letters by C.S. Lewis. So if you're a C.S. Lewis fan, Tilly's latest book is for you. Tilly, welcome. Great to have you here.
Great to be with you.
That's an honor. So you've written, I know, for a number of online publications that are on the front lines of the so-called cultural wars, as it were. What do you see as the primary factors driving the erosion of traditional values in our culture today?
Well, I think it's been several generations of a loss of just a true Christian ethic, and the downstream things that we enjoy. And I think we were enjoying as kind of leftovers of the Christian ethic. In my childhood, we were still enjoying those things. But I do think even in my childhood, those things were just downstream. And I think we were just, I was seeing families, the divorce rates were rising even when I was a kid. That was becoming a normal thing. And obviously now my children are watching a different level of attack on marriage and family. But I think it's been a mistake for the church for a long time to think that we can take back the family without taking back piety. I know that's kind of a strange word for this conversation, but I do think that's really where this began. There was not a commitment to the private Christian ethic, the private holiness among men and women, the marriage habits that were quiet, that arise in the kitchen and in the living room and in the bedroom. The household ethics were lost first, I think. And so obviously, we were experiencing those things even when I was a kid, and when our TV shows were already eroding manhood and womanhood even back then in a way that maybe was more subtle. So now obviously we have a full out war on what even is a woman and what even is a man, what even is a family, what even is a child. But the seeds have been in place for many generations, I think. So,
I like how, yeah, I like how you put it. When we were growing up, we were living more off of like a borrowed capital
hmm yeah.
from Christendom, the centuries of the century long foundations of
hmm
Christendom, and they just quickly eroded. I love the term piety. I came across when I was doing some studies that scholars use this term cosmic piety to describe like the ancient mindset or the medieval
hmm
mindset, and it's the notion is that everyone, it didn't matter who you were, and really literally all over the world, there was this ubiquitous belief that the world was filled with divine meaning and
hmm
purpose, and therefore every person born into the world was born into a divine obligation to
Right.
conform our lives into a harmonious relationship with that divine meaning and purpose. And the institutions that facilitated that
hmm
harmonious relationship were things like family
Right.
and community and faith traditions, and
Yeah.
you could go back to monarchy or whatever it is, but it seems like those institutions have broken down precisely because, as you've identified, piety, that sense
hmm
of obligation to conform our lives to something greater than ourselves has broken down. Yeah, I
Right.
couldn't agree with you more on that.
Yeah, and there's so many things built into that because the sense of obligation, that means that your obligation is first and foremost to God who created
Right.
you, and that's lost. But then from there you have all these other, your obligation to your parents to honor them, to
Right.
follow in their footsteps if they gave you something good, to actually pursue it. Your
Yes.
obligation to your husband or your wife or your children.
Yes.
So just the sense of obligation was a huge loss when we lost that, when we decided our only obligation is to the self,
Right.
to make
Exactly.
sure that I am happy, that I am fulfilled, and that's my only responsibility in this life.
Yeah, and that's the heart of secular liberalism. That your
Yeah.
only obligation is to yourself. And then I heard somebody define identity politics, ironically, as the self kind of magnified into a group. And
Hmm.
so this group now has the same kind of autonomous, you know, uh, uh, yeah, some same kind of autonomous relationship that has no relationship to nation, culture, custom, tradition, nothing. It's and then we must acquiesce to that
hmm
sovereign individual writ large, as it were.
hmm
In your view? I mean, again, you've done a lot of thinking on this. In what ways has the breakdown of the family unit in particular contributed to the moral and social challenges as we're facing that we're facing today as a society? Maybe a little nutshell. I mean, we could write a
Yeah, I
big
mean,
thick book. Thick books have been written on that, but
right. Yeah. Well, we're living in a world of widows and orphans. So
wow,
when you lose your family, that means you lose your father.
wow,
And when you lose your father, you're an orphan. So if we're all widows and orphans, then we don't even know what health looks like. We don't know what safety feels like. We don't know what love looks like and feels like, because we haven't, many of us haven't even seen those things. So I think when I'm talking to or listening to a woman who's really in the kind of feminism has kind of got her by the throat, and she's arguing for things that she doesn't understand really. I think I tend to just look at her and think, if you don't know what a man is like when he's a godly man, I wouldn't trust him either. I wouldn't trust him. I wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him. So there's an emotional element to this that you cannot overstate. When you've never experienced fatherhood as it was meant to be, you can't understand what a healthy society is. Um, So you're an orphan for life, and you can learn those things. And I see people doing that. I see fatherless men learning how to be men. I see fatherless women learning what these relationships can be like when they're whole and when they're operating the way they're supposed to operate. But there's always a part of you that's orphaned. You have to go against the grain.
I love that. You're reminding us there's a very real, genuine woundedness behind wokeness.
Yes.
And that does explain the propensity and inclination, disposition towards anger and destruction,
Yeah, that's right.
of right.
If my life is torn up, everything else should be torn up, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
remember this, as a young person, I was raised in kind of a Christian bubble, more or less. But I remember as a young adult, when I started working in a restaurant, and I think maybe for some reason, 70 or 80% of the other waiters and waitresses at this restaurant were gay and lesbian young men and women, young people. And so it was my first kind of exposure to this culture and to these people, and listening to them talk, and how in the first 3 minutes of a conversation with these people, first of all, they're going to tell you their sexual orientation, which is so funny. Like, it's just right up there at the surface. One of the first things that they're going to want to tell you about themselves, but they'll tell you about their fathers. And it just seemed like it was such it was like right at the tip of their throat, this woundedness that was ready to come out the minute they're going to tell you anything about themselves. They're so defined by this fatherlessness.
Yeah.
And it was just amazing to me how just emotionally stunted they
Yeah.
tended to be. And so just you have to have compassion when you're
Yes. Yeah.
talking to them, just the place that they're coming from.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, when we get asked questions about that all the time, of how do I talk to a family member or so forth,
mhm,
who's in this lifestyle, one of the things I always tell them is, look, you want to value relationship more than being right. We know you're right. You got your truth, but focus on the relationship first, because obviously there's some real wounds behind that, and focus on that first. Then you can work on, over time,
mhm.
trying to recalibrate the thinking. The relationship, it starts with the relationship first. I love that.
Mhm.
What practical steps can families and communities take to restore hope and provide stability for the next generation?
If we don't know how to run our own families, and how to um, be in a healthy relationship that is functional with our own spouses, then we have no business trying to fix anything. There's nothing that you can fix if you can't maintain the core of that family unit, which is that husband and that wife who are living, tending to their spiritual health, confessing sin to one another, keeping short accounts, um, a man who has a purpose and a woman who is following him in that purpose, who is excited about whatever his calling is, whatever road he's on, she's on it with him. Um, that that's the starting place. And then you have this aroma that builds up in a home that is
Mm,
a lovely aroma.
yeah, yeah.
I was actually saved in a home like that. I was visiting and counseling with a pastor in a healthy, normal family home that was out here in the middle of nowhere. There was nobody cool. There was nothing fancy happening in this home. It was just a healthy aroma that I was so ready for. So I have a huge belief in the power of individual healthy families being the agent of change in the wider culture,
Mm.
because I've seen it.
Yeah, I love it. One of my favorite books is a theology of gardening called "The Fragrance of God." And you
Oh,
remind, and again, one of the things that he recommends is family gardening.
yes.
Yeah, yeah, right. I mean, it just, but yeah, what you're saying about the aroma is just so beautiful. Or I've heard it put, we're the ones who left the garden. God didn't. God is beauty. God is truth. Right?
Right.
God is good. We
Right.
left the garden. We're called back to it. So
Yes.
fragrance, yeah, and aroma. I love that.
Hmm.
Tell us about your new book. This is really neat. I've read the Screw Tape Letters. I'm a C.S. Lewis fan. Love the Narnia Chronicles, and I understand this is a really interesting twist
Hmm.
on Screw Tape. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so it's a group of 30, around 30 letters, which is the length of Screw Tape. And instead of a male patient, in Screw Tape, the two demons are corresponding about this patient who they're trying to tempt in any way they can to separate him from the enemy, which is God. And in my book, there is a patient, but it's a female living today. So you follow this patient from, she's a newlywed and a new Christian at the beginning of the book. So there's a lot of marital stuff. There's a lot of just basic Christian discipleship, Christian living themes, and you follow her all the way to middle age in the book, which is a longer period of time than Screw Tape, actually. But because of that, she gets into the years of parenting. She gets into a little bit of aging and things like that. So it is a little bit of a feminine voice as well. The demon who's writing the letters, with Screw Tape, it was kind of this Oxford Dawn voice that he had. And in this, it's sort of this slightly catty female demon writing to a demon named Hemlock. So
I absolutely love it. It's so cool because if you if you think it through, sin permeates everything. It permeates our DNA and it permeates our gender, our gender distinction. So there's going to be temptations specific to women that men don't necessarily wrestle with. Obviously, there's common temptation, but this is really neat. This is because I never even thought about it, but Screw Tape is going to be male specific, and this is a really nice compliment.
And I would never say I love Screw Tape. Obviously, I would never have copied him if I didn't love him. But I think Screw Tape is great for anyone at any time. So I would never say this is the girl version to your male Screw Tape. But but there were some things about living as a Christian woman married to a normal Christian man in a normal church that I wanted to write about, and the sort of fictionalizing of these things through the form of these letters just made it really, really easy to write about those things and get more illustration in than I would have been able to do with a straight prose piece. So I found it to be a really useful device, and I enjoyed it.
And to help cultivate piety.
That's right.
Right?
Yes, there is a chapter about gardening in the book, actually.
There you go.
What do you know? Demons hate gardening.
Yes, of course
they think
they
it's a dangerous practice.
They ruined it. That's right. They ruined it. Yeah. No, absolutely. I love stories in terms of the way they awaken the moral imagination and help, just bring the whole soul together. Our logos, ethos, pathos, our intellectual, moral, aesthetic sentiments. That's just what I absolutely love. So that's absolutely wonderful, wonderful stuff, gang. If you do want to get this book, you could just click on the link below. And I highly recommend it. Turley is a wonderful author. And I think, again, this is something that's going to awaken the moral imagination and foster that piety that is the heart of the health of all of our institutional structures. There is a cultural reawakening happening. It's beautiful. Canon Press that published the book is very much part of that. And I think this book, My Dear Hemlock, will be a wonderful addition to not just your bookshelves, but to the reawakening of a classical Christian culture as well. Turley, thank you so much for being with us. Come on back again. I know you write quite a bit, so the next time you have a book out, please come and visit us again.
That would be fun. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you.